providing that particular feedback, and we appreciate you all doing that. There are a couple institutions that we're still waiting on some information from, so I will put this information in the chat. But these are the institutions so far that are in red, that have already provided their feedback to the second survey that we had out. If your name is not highlighted in red, we're either still waiting on that information. Please feel free to reach out to me, and I will be sharing this PowerPoint presentation with you all to, if you have not, in fact, provided the responses. So again, if your institution is in red, that means we have received your survey responses back already. And I'll just give you all a moment to look at that. So this again is the link for the survey. I'll make sure I get that to you all to share and to look at this information, and I'll put the links in the chat as well. One other thing is that Dr. Woolfolk and I, we have began to start doing what we call as the South Carolina Military Credit Taskforce Roadshow. And what we're trying to do is to engage with each institution individually to see how things are going with your institution, to also share with you, share with us what things that you're talking about on your campuses. You can scan this QR code that's listed here, and it'll actually bring up a calendar, and you can actually schedule a time with you as well as with your institutional work group in reference to meeting with us. We are going to be doing the roadshow chats starting in the month of October all the way through December. So if you could, and I will also be sharing this information with you guys after the meeting today, but please, if you would like to look at the availability, we would like to meet with your institutional work groups on campus to share how things are going with your military credit mobility. The very last thing I want to do is to save the date. We are looking forward to possibly having a South Carolina Military Task Force convening in the month of March or April of 2024. In a few minutes, I'll put out a poll for you all. Just wanted to share the slides first because I can't do the poll and that at the same time, but actually I can. I am going to actually put this out now, and we just need to get your feedback. If you guys will see the poll post, I'm just going to give it about a couple of seconds to do that, but we're trying to see when would it be a good time to have a task force convening in person, and we will start working on planning that event. We just want to kind of see what's going to be the best time of the semester. We know spring going towards May, maybe too much. So we're looking at March and April. I know you all have your spring breaks that are coming up, and we know everybody may not be able to attend, but we are trying to come up with at least a month that we think that the majority of you all will be able to attend. And I know Gina, you'll love to come and see us in March or April. That's usually our warm months. I know it may be still a little cool in Minnesota, but those are the dates that we're looking at. It looks like March so far would be with 73%. It's about that time for that. And then I'll end that poll. And thank you all so much for doing that as well. And then the very last thing I want to share with you, and Adam, I'm gonna let you have the show, is that one other poll. We are trying to stay on topic in reference to meeting with you all to keep things abreast, as well as anything else we need to kind of do in reference to the task force. And so we are looking at trying to host another meeting. And if you give me a second, I'm trying to get that poll back out. There we go. We are looking at trying to do another meeting in November. We know we're coming close to the holidays. And so if you guys could please check your schedules really quickly to see if any particular date in the month of November, we're looking at Tuesday, November the 28th at 2:00 p.m. and Wednesday, November the 29th at 9 a.m. and 2:00 p.m. And I'll just give a few more seconds for the poll. I'm going to stop sharing because the next person's voice that you will be hearing from will be Adam. And Adam, I'll give you time to go ahead and get your screens up and going while the next poll is coming up. Okay, and give him a couple more seconds. Okay, seems like everybody with this crew is a morning crew. And so it looks like November the 29th at 9 a.m. would possibly be the best meeting time. And I know everyone can't meet, but we will be sharing the recordings and the presentation. So that covers everything that I wanted to share with you all. Just a reminder, I'll be putting some information in the chat in reference to the roadshow. Okay, will do. Dr. Demmaster, I got that message. Yes, sir. We'll make sure that you all get this information via email to have everything that you need to do for the next couple of weeks. So I'm going to end that poll. Well, it seems like the 28th might be November the 28th. That's 41% at 2 midnight. Okay. All right. Adam, you are good to go, sir.
Thank you so much. Just to make sure you guys can all see my screen, yes?
Yes.
Perfect. So when I was going to grab my coffee this morning, I noticed I had this mug there hanging out with mine. So I figured I'd grab this one and represent this morning for South Carolina. So I'm currently located in Nebraska. My wife is originally from South Carolina, and she actually attended both Midlands and Lander. So I have a nice sort of soft spot for South Carolina through my wife. So what I'm going to talk about here today, though, so my background, I have spent probably about the last 15 years or so doing a lot with military credit and really creating sort of custom policies and degree plans to help universities really sort of take advantage of military learning and help military students earn their degree. So what I'm going to go through here is sort of a prior learning inventory and some case studies that we worked on over the past month or so, where we're really trying to look at how are South Carolina institutions handling military transfer credit, right? We worked with an R1, an R2, and a technical institution, right? And what we did is I took an analysis of all of the catalog policies and public-facing web pages, and then we also met and had an interview with several of the key players regarding transfer credit, regarding the process and how they establish equivalencies. And one thing I want to really sort of highlight here is that this is really just to provide sort of a baseline analysis of current policies, right? It's not to make any recommendations. It's not to say this policy is good or bad, right? It's really just to say, here's what it is. And then each institution can sort of make their own decisions about what to do with the information. And please, if you have questions or anything as I go through this, please feel free to sort of raise that hand or throw it in the chat. And Alfie, if you could help with that, that would be great. So one of the things we're looking at this is within two sort of different frameworks, right? One is this framework, which if you've been on this call before, you've probably seen many times, which is from Dr. Martyr at USC, which is sort of 4 different definitions of how transfer credit can apply at your institution is defined, right? So how transfer credit affects the admissibility, then transferability, what are the sort of conditions to accept transfer credit, course equivalency, how is an equivalency from prior learning to your courses made, and then degree applicability, how can that credit apply to your degree? So for example, with course equivalency, you may make a decision that says this transfer course from the military is equivalent to political science 101, but degree applicability says, now can I use that course within the major or not? Is it only elective? How can I actually apply that course? Is that course in the degree program? So there's a difference between sort of that equivalency and degree applicability. The other sort of model that we're really sort of implementing with this is the joint statement on the transfer and award of credit from ACRO, CHIA, and ACE. What it provides is sort of 8 key considerations to help universities become a proactive institution, right, in terms of reflecting equity-minded transfer credit practices. And some of the key things I like to remember from there, right, is that institutional autonomy, right? Every institution is responsible for determining their own policies and making sure it's consistent with the mission, their mission and their standards. So this kind of goes back to what I was talking about previously, right? We're not here to sort of make recommendations on it, right? What every institution does is up to them. But denial of credit without a reasonable basis and clear rationale undermines students and the public's trust in our system of higher education. Right. So if we're going to say, hey, we can't apply this credit, we should have a good reason why that credit is not going to apply. So what I did is I've really looked at all of these sort of together, right? How does the, the JSTAC, as I'm calling it for short, that joint statement, interact with sort of those 4 categories of transfer credit? And I'm really looking at 4 specific key considerations within that JSTAC model. There's some other considerations regarding accreditation and some other pieces that really weren't being researched within this context. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I want to sort of get to the results. If anybody has any questions from this, feel free to jump in. So really, sort of next I want to talk about is sort of what makes up military transfer credit mobility. This is sort of very high level. There's 2 main components, right? What are your policies and procedures, and are they transfer friendly? And then do you have a transfer friendly degree plan to accept that credit that's coming in? The policies enable it, the transfer degree plans receive it. You have solid policies for all of those, and you have good military credit mobility. But what we're focusing on today really is just the transfer friendly policies and procedures. We're not delving into degree plans or looking at any of that. We're just looking at just policies and procedures. I'm going to talk, as I go through this, a little bit about military courses and versus military experience. So I just want to sort of define those here really quick. On the JST, you'll see 2 main sections regarding ACE credit recommendations. One at the top is military courses, and those are the formal courses that are taught through military schoolhouses. And then you have a section called military experience. This is essentially like an on-the-job learning from service members, but it's really a set of validated knowledge, skills, and abilities expected of each service member in a specific occupation at a specific rank or pay grade that ACE reviews with a team of faculty members, and they validate that knowledge. All right, so now we're going to get into it. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is that admissibility, and then how the military transfer credit impacts it. So at the R1 institution, a military student may enter as a freshman or a transfer student. And if it's a transfer student, they have to have 30 semester hours of prior college. Yep, and someone have a...
All right, have a great...
Okay. So they have 30 semesters of prior college required, and that's the same at the R2 institution as well. To be a transfer student, they have to have that 30 semesters of prior college credit. At the R1, 6 semester hours of military credit can apply towards that 30. So the way that really works is that when they're doing their admissions for a transfer student, they check to make sure they have 24 semester hours of credit. At the R1, the JST is required to admissions if the student self-identifies as a service member. And that self-identification is actually across all 3 institutions, right? The military service member has to self-identify. The R2 institution does not require the JST prior to admission. And then at the technical institution, the prior learning really plays no role in the admissions decision. Traditional transfer credit may have some placement testing waived based off their college transcripts, and that JST is not required prior to admissions at the technical institution as well. Any questions or comments on this from anybody? All right, moving forward. So the transferability aspect. So this is really, again, is the conditions that set the stage for applying credit. So at the R1 institution and the R2, there's a maximum of 30 semester hours of military credit that can be applied for a bachelor's degree. The R2 institution also has an associate program, and within that, only 15 semester credits of military credit can apply. At the R1, they also have a limit of 76 semester hours may be transferred from a regional 2-year institution. You'll see in this presentation, I have some information regarding military credit and traditional credit, because that's going to play into one of the standards or not standards, I'm sorry, one of the key considerations from that joint statement of transfer credit later on. At the technical institution, they have no specific maximum of military credit. So they do have that 25% residency requirement, which is most institutions have, right, due to various accreditation. But within that, so 75% of a degree can be transfer credit, and military learning could fulfill up to that 75% in terms of the way their policies work. No questions. I'm going to keep moving forward because we do have a sort of fair amount to cover, and then we can go back and answer any sort of questions as well as we go. Course equivalency. So really, how does each institution make those equivalency decisions? So the R1 institution, so they review the courses and they review the military experience section of the JST. They're also starting to do some limited review of military occupations with their academic team, where they'll sort of proactively look at an occupation, and their academic team will make equivalency decisions and send it to the registrar's office to add to their equivalency database. It is very limited from what they said, but it's something that they're beginning to look at and start to do. Typically, all of their military learning is equated to electives, but they are starting to turn the corner on creating specific equivalencies. And when I say they're starting to, this is very brand new at this institution. They were saying they'll probably be really set up to do this more efficiently by sort of the end of November. So this is brand new, where they're starting to actually equate military learning to specific equivalencies as opposed to just electives. The equivalency decisions are made by faculty and are not student or degree plan specific. And I'm going to go over that a little bit more when I talk about process at each institution. But really what they have done is they separate out course equivalency from degree applicability. The R2 institution will review courses and military experience, and they'll award credit if the military credit aligns to the type of courses offered at the institution. So, for example, if a military student has a recommendation of land navigation, but the institution does not have any courses within that realm of land navigation or orienteering or anything similar to that, then that credit would not be able to apply to the student's degree plan, whether as an elective at all. They don't evaluate as equivalent to any specific course. All military learning comes in as an elective, and the evaluation decisions are made by the military program staff. At the technical institution, they review for 3 specific ACE recommendations on the JST. They do not review the military experiences. And those 3 specific ACE recommendations that they're looking for are supervision, CPR, and leadership. Credit beyond those 3 recommendations is based upon dean approval. And those equivalency decisions are made by the military program staff based on sort of inherited equivalencies that were created before the current team took over that role. So you see there's 3 different models here about how course equivalencies are made, right? One are sort of using existing equivalencies that have been established. Another one, it really separates out the equivalencies and makes them by the faculty. And the other one looks at equivalencies by the military program staff and comes as elective. So each institution does things a little bit differently based on their needs and what works for them. Any questions or thoughts on this one? Because I don't know if is this similar to anybody else's institution? Is this similar to how you all work at all? All right, I have no takers, so we'll
Adam, yeah, for Winthrop, so what the R2 is we'll review, kind of a case by case, and if there's something that aligns with something we offer, we'll give them credit. We're not, we don't have the breadth of programs that some other places have. So,
Gotcha.
We
you.
tend to get a lot of ours coming in with their, they're pretty military specific. They're infantrymen. They're not coming in as language specialists or in roles like that. So it's a little hard to equate someone that's getting 3 credits for marksmanship, and I can't quite use that in teacher ed. So
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, Adam, we farm ours out at AU to, I first let someone who's on our military task force here that we've really just reinstated recently. They review it and offer what they feel the student should receive credit for. Sometimes it's a little iffy even for me to think we could give credit for it, but I farm it out to that specific dean of, for example, if it's a supervision, I'll farm that out to the College of Business dean to see what they feel. No one's really open to allowing very specific credit yet, but we're working on that.
Great. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. I'm going to move on here to degree applicability. So at the R1 institution, I sort of mentioned this a little bit already. They separate course equivalency from degree applicability. So what they really do is they have, they'll take the specific course and they'll route it to a faculty member. And that but it's literally just the course that's routed. It's not connected to a student record or to a degree plan. It's simply the course. And then a faculty member will make an equivalency decision and send that back to the registrar's office. So it's very sort of separate from student degree plan applicability. This is very different from the technical institution. At the technical institution, the course equivalency is dependent on degree applicability. So if they're filling one of the SAC requirements for math, for example, right, they have a lot more flexibility in accepting sort of credit. But if they're looking for a specific course, they have to ensure the qualification of course instructors due to the SAC's criteria for their articulations that might go to a different institution. They want to make sure all of those criteria and accreditation requirements are being met. So based on where that course may apply with a degree plan depends on how that course may be applied as an equivalency. And then they have those 3 pre-approved courses which may apply as a specific course equivalency. At the R2 institution for degree applicability, it's relatively straightforward. All credit is applied as elective credit. So let's talk about the process a little bit. So for that current state with the R1, right, the evaluation is initiated during that first advisement session with the academic advisor. When I was meeting with the R1 institution, we focused most of our time on that future state that they're working to implement sort of by that end of November. And in this state, the JST is currently required during admissions, but so that JST arrives during that admissions process. And they have a software that will scan the JST and determine the courses that are on that JST automatically. And then it will go into their database equivalency and see if there's an existing equivalency. And I forgot to put my yes, no's on here. I apologize for this. If there is a yes right here, it'll apply directly to the degree plan. If there is no existing equivalency, it'll be routed to the faculty for an equivalency decision. New equivalencies are sent to the reg office, and then credit can be applied to the degree plan. So if an equivalency is established for a specific course that is required on that student's degree plan, it would automatically apply. However, at the moment, most of those equivalencies, as I mentioned earlier, are all being made as electives. And then when the student meets, after the student is enrolled and the student meets with their academic advisor at that first advising session, they have a process where their advisors, some advisors have been received some training and are approved and sort of given the authority by their academic team to move some of those elective credits to specific course credits. So generally all that credit, like I said, is equated to elective, and the advisor can say, based on this academics, we'll take this course from the military and put it as a gen ed or as a major requirement. And they're authorized to do that. At the R2 institution, so the JST is reviewed after admissions. And also this process is very straightforward, and a lot of this is because at the R2 institution is really a sort of a one-person show, right? The military programs team makes the admissions decision for the military student. They're the one that receives the JST, and they're the one that evaluates the JST. So this all sort of happens in one location. So they will make that admissions decision, and the JST, when they're notified by the admissions team that a student's file is complete, then they'll make the admission decision, and then they'll review the JST after admissions. The JST is reviewed by the military programs team. The evaluation results are sent to the Reg office, and credit is applied to the degree plan. If requested, the student will be notified that results have been posted to their degree plan. So some of the students, when they meet with that military programs team, are very anxious to know what their military credit is, and then if they are, they'll be notified. But if they're not really anxious about it, then the student just has to know to go in there and look to see what credit has been applied. The whole process typically takes between about 72 hours or so, right, from receipt to credit being applied. At the technical institution, so the JST is received by the military programs team, sent to admissions for processing. The military programs team is then notified that JST has been accepted as an official transcript. Military programs evaluates the transcript. And when they're evaluating it, they're looking specifically for the ACE recommendations of supervision, CPR, and leadership. After those three specific equivalencies will be applied to the degree program, transfer form with applicable credit is sent to the registrar's office. That's about 48 hours for the credit to show on the student record. And then they have a process that will notify the student that an evaluation has been processed. And it takes approximately 2 to 3 weeks from JST receipt to the process wraps up. And as part of that notification, they also let the student know that the student may initiate a dean review for additional credit beyond the 3 of supervision, CPR, and leadership. But it is upon the student to set up that meeting with the dean and have that conversation for additional credit. So sort of summarizing all the process and the policy pieces. So at a glance here, military courses are reviewed by the R1 and the R2, and then the 3 specific pre-approved ACE recommendations at the technical. Military experience is reviewed by the R1 and the R2, not by the technical. Specific course equivalencies at the R1 is currently electives only, but they're starting to do specific equivalencies. The R2 is elective credit only, no specific equivalencies. And at the technical, for the 3 approved, yes, others with student initiated dean approval. Apply as non-electives. So I sort of mentioned this earlier, right, where there's a difference between saying this is equivalent to a specific course and then applying it somewhere that's not an elective. At the R1, they can do that with the academic advisor approval during that first advising session. The R2 does not, the technical does. The transfer credit limits are 30 credits, 30 credits, and this is for the bachelor's degree. And the technical, that's not applicable. The associate transfer credit limits, it's not applicable for the R1, 15 at the R2, and then 75% at the technical. One of the other things I sort of talked about is, are the students able to see what credit would apply prior to the admissions decision, prior to starting? And at the R1, they do have a pre-admissions unofficial evaluation. What it shows is the specific, it shows the course equivalencies. It does not show how those equivalencies would apply to the degree. So their pre-admissions sort of evaluation is equivalency only, not degree applicability. At the R2, they can do an unofficial sort of evaluation, including sort of how that might apply to the degree. A lot of this goes back to sort of the one-person show, right, where they can look at it and just have that conversation with the student if they want to know, because that person also does the evaluations and the admissions decisions. The technical institution does not have a unofficial evaluation prior. Will the evaluation be completed prior to the academic start? For the R1, that's yes, because they require the JST prior to admissions. The R2 is generally yes, because that's again is that one person show, and they get that evaluation done within that's sort of 72 hours. And the technical is really just depends on when that student sends in the JST, right? And the onus is really on that student to send the JST and the official version as early in the term as process. They do sort of have an unofficial kind of process of a student should only really attend one term without having the officials on file. It's sort of an unofficial rule of thumb. And this is sort of the at a glance summary, right, of this policies within the admissibility and transfer credit, transferability, equivalency, and applicability. My next few slides are going into sort of the key considerations within that joint statement. But before I go into that, I'll just take a quick breath to see if anybody has any questions or thoughts about this summary.
Adam, as you're taking a break, to everyone, if with the joint statement of credit article, that actual article was sent to you all in your calendar invite. It's a quick read, about 1.5 pages, front and back. So just if you wanted to get some more insight about the considerations that Adam's about to talk about, that article is also available in your calendar invite.
So we'll go to that first key consideration, which is the standard for evaluating credit should be the same regardless of where the learning took place. So for this consideration, what I really looked at was what are the standards and process for evaluating traditional credit from an accredited university compared to the evaluation standards for evaluating military credit. So the R1 institution, as I mentioned, has decoupled that equivalency from degree applicability. They're doing that for both traditional and military credit, and the same staff conducts that evaluation process. And then courses that are determined equivalent to a program requirement are automatically applied to the degree. The key sort of differentiation here is that traditional transfer credit may automatically apply as general education major or elective, but currently military credit is listed generally as equivalent to either a lower level or upper level elective and may automatically apply within that category. As they start to turn the corner on making equivalencies from military credit to specific courses, they will automatically apply, but they're not quite there yet. And most of the time it's still being applied as elective. So that's sort of the key difference between how that learning is evaluated between those two sources. Learning through military courses and through military experience are reviewed. Essentially, the way that they view this is if ACE recommends the credit, then credit is considered. Sort of think of it in terms of at this institution, the ACE recommending credit sort of stands as a placeholder for regional accreditation, right? If you want to think of it in that way. I mean, ACE is not an accrediting body, right? But in terms of the way that they view military learning, if ACE recommends credit, it can apply. The military credit is limited to the maximum of 30 semester hours. Traditional transfer credit may apply up to 75% of a degree, with that exception that I mentioned earlier as well of the 2-year institution is that 76 credits. For the R2 institution, traditional transcripts are evaluated for college credit during the admissions process. Military evaluations occur after the student has been accepted. So a slight difference of when the evaluations occur. But the student may receive an unofficial evaluation of credit for both prior to admissions. The traditional and the military evaluations are handled by different teams. Here, the military credit is applied as elective credit only. Traditional credit may apply as beyond just elective. They also, I mentioned this earlier, to military credit will only be applied if it's aligned to something offered at their institution. Learning occurred through military courses is reviewed, as well as learning through military experience. And military credit is limited to a maximum of 30 semester hours. Traditional transfer credit may apply up to 75%. One of the reasons why I'm sort of mentioning this, whether learning has occurred through courses or through military experience is reviewed, is that sort of goes back to where the learning took place, right? So the recommendations on the JST from courses versus experience is a slightly different recommendation of where that learning occurred, whether it's in a formal classroom instruction or sort of on the job training. So that sort of also applies within this. And it's not necessarily uncommon to have an institution that will award credit for courses, but not necessarily the military experience. So that's something I wanted to specifically ask and put into this research. For the R3 institution, so the student records conducts the evaluation for traditional credit, and the military programs team conducts the evaluation for military credit. So different teams evaluate for the credit. The military credit has predetermined equivalencies established for the ACE recommendations of supervision, CPR, and leadership. And here's where the key difference occurs within this process at the technical. So for traditional transcripts, new equivalencies may be established and awarded during the traditional transfer credit review process, right? So student records will award a placeholder for a course if there is no equivalency, if they're not sure of what the course equivalency would be. So they put a placeholder in, and then they contact the dean or the department chair for an equivalency decision. So in the traditional transfer credit, there's a proactive process of reaching out to the dean for equivalency. And in the military review for a new equivalency, the student must initiate the dean or department chair equivalency for anything beyond the established 3. So traditional is proactive, the other one, military, is student initiated. Military credit can apply as an elective, a major, or general education, depending on the degree. It's not limited to elective. And then learning occurring through military courses are reviewed. Learning occurring through military experience is not reviewed. And then military credit follows the same transfer limit guideline as traditional credit, 75% of the degree. So you see, again, there's some there's variation across all 3 institutions in sort of how the treatment and how the learning occurs between traditional and military learning. All right, so this second key consideration, credit awards should be applied consistently and equitably for all students. So the R1 institution is in the process of implementing a system, right? I mentioned that will automatically scan and check for established equivalencies. So any new equivalency that is established is recorded in their system and will automatically be applied. They also have a process where they are training faculty on how to make equivalency decisions for traditional transfer credit. Training on how to evaluate military credit is limited. At the R2, all military credit evaluations are conducted by the same person within the military program staff. All military credit is transferred as elective with no specific equivalencies established. So how that specifically applies for the consistency and equitable, right? We didn't actually get into that with any 3 institutions in terms of, do they have a process to quality control their own evaluation process, right? To go through and sort of QC and see. We didn't really get into that conversation with the institutions, but these are all sort of factors that I think apply towards credit being applied consistently and equitably. At the technical institution, they apply military transfer credit for the 3 established equivalencies, and then all the evaluations are conducted by the same person in the staff, right? And then it can apply as elective, major, or general education depending on the degree requirements. So I want to put that in there too, because equivalency and degree applicability are linked within the technical, how one course may apply for one student may apply differently for another student based on what the degree requirements are and the specific needs within that program. The third consideration is that the policies should aim to maximize the amount of credit applied to fulfill requirements. So what I have listed here are just sort of quick policy pieces that impact the amount of credit that could be applied, right? Whether it's an official policy or a procedure, these are things that impact how the credit can be applied. So at the R1, it's capped at 30 credit from, I forgot, I mistyped here on this one. I meant to change that and I missed this update. Credit for military experience is reviewed at the R1. So I apologize for that. I will fix that on this deck. But military credit experience is reviewed. and military transfer credit is typically applied as elective. At the R2, military credit is capped at 30, courses and experience are reviewed, and military transfer credit is applied as elective. At the technical, up to 75%, credit for experience is not reviewed. It can apply as elective, gen ed, or major. And military credit is limited to the 3 established equivalencies unless the student initiates a dean review process. So at the beginning of the call, I mentioned, the purpose of this research was really to just document what is and is not to make specific recommendations. But if we were going to go down the path in terms of how or what to do to improve and maximize the amount of credit, right, and to improve that transfer credit mobility, this would probably be the page to address, right? Whether or not these institutions, these policies work for you, are legacy policies, or should be changed, are good policies or not, that's all up to your institutional needs and your individual sort of mission, right? But if you were going to look at things, like, this would be the key slide, I would say, right? If you want to make sort of discussions within your institution. Policies and practices must be reasonable, transparent, and easily understood. All right, so in the R1, right, there's a pre-admissions evaluation where the student can see the equivalencies that established, but not how those equivalencies apply to a degree. A lot of military students, sometimes they're transfer shopping, right? They're looking for an institution that's going to recognize their learning, and they a lot of times they may want to know before they enroll at an institution. So I wanted to put that in here because that really affects that transparency, right, for that student in terms of what they're going to get and how they're going to make a decision about what institution to enroll in. Post-acceptance and pre-academic start, the student can see how the credit is applied to their degree. And the R1 institution has a web page specifically for military transfer credit, and including links where they can look to established equivalencies. At the R2, the students are able to obtain an official pre-admissions evaluation. The traditional transfer credit is evaluated during the admissions. And once admitted, students are able to see what is transferred prior to academic start. The JST evaluations are post-admittance and available within 72 hours. They do not have a web page that specifically addresses military transfer credit. They also have an equivalency table, other equivalencies, but it's not linked to anywhere from their website. At the technical institution, the evaluations are processed when the JSC is received, typically 2 to 3 weeks. They are the only institution in this that had a process that notified the student that the JSC was received and reviewed for transfer credit, and that they can then view the transfer credit on the account. The other institutions, the student has to take that onus upon themselves. They had that unofficial rule of thumb that I mentioned. They can only attend 1 semester, and they do not have a webpage specifically for military transfer credit. Skip that last slide was my notes. I forgot to delete that one out here. So additional things I just want to mention for some points of interest here, then I'll open this up for any questions. The R1 and the technical institution both reference SACS accreditation, but within some different contexts. So at the R1, the SACS was adamant when they did their accreditation review that faculty should be involved in making the equivalency decisions for incoming credits. They were very, very clear they wanted the faculty to make those calls. And then they also wanted to make sure that the R1 has a transfer process and are following that process. They don't really care too much what that process is or what that criteria is, as long as they have a process and they follow it. At the technical institution, right, they had a key decision in determining eligible transfer credit is that qualification of the instructor for incoming credit. They wanted to, this is to ensure, I mentioned this a little bit, that programmatic articulation agreements they have with other institutions are meeting the SACS criteria. So that both of those institutions really reference the SACS standards and how it applies for them specifically and what they need to do to meet those. All the institutions have legacy policies and procedures that are inherited. The R1 is in the process of implementing a large-scale procedural change to both traditional and military evaluations. But they all have sort of these legacy policies in place. The The technical institution also mentioned how important it was to have consistency in the valuations with the other technical colleges within the system. And they mentioned that this is a key driver to make sure that that's